My full name is Iniabasi Oluwasemilore Samuel Henshaw. I am of Nigerian descent. I live in Southeast London. I make music. I am a Christian. My dad's a reverend. I have two sisters, and one's older, one's younger. So I'm the middle child. So obviously the favorite of my parents. I have a mum as well. I also have a mum that comes with my dad. For as long as I've known, I think I've always been creative. I come from a creative family. My dad was an actor in Nigeria, in Nollywood, many years ago, and a director and a writer. And so yeah, I've always come from like a very creative family. Not necessarily in music, but just everyone does their own things. I've got cousins that are like artists, and yeah, everyone's creative in some way or the other. So yeah, growing up, I think music was a hobby for me, and it was something that I realized I was gifted in early on, but it was never something that I never perceived it as something I could do for a living. I never perceived it as something that could be a career of any sort. So I kind of was just, and I think also I was just interested in a bunch of other things. So I never really looked at music in that way. I used to draw, so I saw myself like getting into art at one point. I love writing stories, so I used to write like loads of mini books, like and just stories and stuff. And so I even at one point perceived myself doing that. My mum's a writer too, so there was just all these many things that I just felt that I could do, and tried all of them, and ended up noticing that like music was always in the midst of whatever I was doing. No matter where I was, music was always there. And I think that's kind of when I wouldn't say I gave into it, but I think I realized that it was like, okay, maybe this is my calling. Maybe this is something that I should be doing. And, you know, I was leading worship at church or just playing instruments at church and stuff. And so when I was doing that, I never really realized it could have been more. And so, yeah, eventually I was like, okay, cool. Music seems to be the thing. God, then my parents. But I will say my parents a lot because of how much they're like willing to serve God, and how uncompromising they are with like their faith, with their beliefs, with just who they are as people, and how willing they are to. I think I feel like our generation struggles with the idea of like being able to show love to people, but still be able to be honest and firm and stand strong in what you believe. I feel like sometimes people try and I always say that people they confuse the idea of love and tolerance, and this idea that in order for you to feel like I love you, I need to tolerate stuff from you that, you know, that you do. And growing up, I never received that, and I never understood that. So growing up from my parents, I figured that it was like, well, if you don't love me, then, you know, allow me to do the stuff I want to do. And the older I got, I learned from them that like, and I learned through their actions as I've gotten older that, wow, you guys truly did love me, because the things that you, and my sisters, but the things that you did not want or didn't appreciate that I was doing, you vocalized it, and you were very clear on the fact that these were things that you weren't happy with, but you never like stopped loving me. And so I think for me, it's integrity as well. They got a ton of integrity, and they're just people of like their characters just really speak for self, and you know, I've seen them suffer so many things, and just to still have faith in God and to still trust in Him in everything that they go through is a huge inspiration to me. And I aspire to be like that one day, hopefully. And so yeah, them, and then, you know, people. I love people, and I love being inspired by what I see from people. You know, whether it's, no matter what it is, I'm just inspired by people. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm inspired, and yeah, love to get to know people, and watching people, and you know, hearing stories from them, and this and that. So yeah, God, my parents, and everyone else. At a young age, I wasn't sure of what I wanted to be. And I'm saying it like I'm super old now. I'm still pretty young. But when I was younger, I wasn't 100% sure on what I wanted to be. And I was actually quite fortunate to have sort of found my purpose quite early on. I actually went to uni because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to uni to just kind of fill out that gap and that time. And I went to study music because I was like, this is the easiest option. And through doing that, I did end up finding what I wanted to do, which was music. We live in a generation now, and a time now, where it's way more possible to do what you're passionate about and do what you're gifted in than people realize. And one thing that I think I noticed about being a young person was that it's very easy to get distracted by what everyone else is doing. It creates like a filter in your mind. I really loved football when I was younger, and I probably was good enough to like have ended up playing for a team. But I didn't play football because my dad was a pastor, and football lands on a Sunday, so I couldn't play on a Sunday because I had to go to church. And that really frustrated me for years. But within that, I was playing at church every Sunday, and that meant I was getting better at the gift that I had. I was suddenly like actually nurturing it and becoming better with that. And so that ended up helping me have this knowledge of music. And so I kind of, the older I got now, in hindsight, when I look back, I'm like, wow, everything that I really wanted to do and I was distracted by. And it wasn't because I didn't just personally find football interesting. I did. But I also felt like, I love football, so that's got to be my calling. But I also loved music, and I didn't realize how apparent music was in my life. And so essentially what I'm trying to say is like, really sit down and think about, like, figure out what your passion actually is, and like, because it's not always going to be that obvious. What I realized was that there was a side of me that was kind of like, maybe I don't want to do music because music's not the cool thing to do, or music's not like it's not the in your face obvious thing that, you know, a person should be doing, and all my friends aren't doing it, and can I make it? And there's always these things that come into your mind of like self-doubt and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I just realized it was there, and it was something that was always there, and it was something that I was gifted in, and so decided to give it a chance and walk in it. And so distraction from what everyone else is doing plays a big part. And sometimes you need to silence everything else going on around you to really truly tap into what your calling and what your purpose might be. One other thing that I will add to that is I think sometimes we live in a generation where we also like to have things given to us quickly. Sometimes if we don't get what we want immediately from the thing that we believe we are passionate about. So like I might start a business and realize that if the business hasn't, become this massive thing that's made millions of pounds in the space of like a year, we suddenly get discouraged and we give up and we're like, well, that's not my passion then. And I think that's not realistic. And we have to understand that the reality of having a passion and just anything in life, in order to gain something good, you're going to struggle and it's going to be hard, and you're going to go through a phase of like failure, and you're going to go through a phase of things just not going the way that you want to. And so I think we have to get used to the idea of being uncomfortable. And just because we have a passion and it doesn't go the way that we want it to go immediately does not mean that it's not God's calling for our life, and it doesn't mean that it's not God's purpose for our life, and so on and so forth. And so I think there's all those factors that play into it, and so it really is about getting rid of a lot of the filters in our mind and things that block us from really achieving and pursuing that. So yeah, so a lot of it is a mental thing and a prayer thing. You really have to like give a lot of that stuff to God. Sometimes as well, it's easy to hear what other people have to say in regards to your life, which there isn't an issue with. But I think the first point of call should be like, yo, God, like, is this what, like, what do you want me to do? Like, what is my purpose? And 9 times out of 10, it will be sitting right in front of you. It will be something you didn't even realize it was meant to be. But it is again about giving it to God, and your prayer being quite specific in the area of remove all of the like distractions. In my head, I'm picturing it as like sort of bushes that are kind of covering up what your actual purpose is, and it's like, Lord, just brush off the leaves and allow me to see clearly what it is that you what your purpose is for me and what my purpose is. So yeah, I think just give that to God for sure. I always say to people, I think just the whole thing. I think the facts. It's hard to like pinpoint one thing, and I also think like thinking of the idea of like me thinking about my career as a whole and then trying to say, oh yeah, this is the one moment in my career that I love. Bearing in mind I'm not done, it's kind of like, it's like I think I'm just grateful that I've even got a career. I'm grateful that, when I think about where I actually started, where I should have ended up, that's a whole different story. But like where I should have ended up in life, and the fact that I've ended up with a career that, I love, and I'm doing what I love. And I mean, I'm allowed to be in positions like this where I can help inspire some people, and it's opened doors that I, couldn't think of. It's too hard to like pinpoint one specific thing. And at the same time, this is like a life thing as well. So some of the biggest highlights of my life have happened in the same sort of time as my career. Some of them have like just been in moments of my career that really, big life changes have happened as well. So it's the whole thing. I would just say it's the whole thing so far. The fact that I can even sit here and do this is a career highlight, so yeah, the entire thing is a highlight for me. It's great. I love it. Again, that's wiping away the filters and the distractions. Again, I think like our generation, we're in a time where it's very easy to get caught up in watching what other people are doing. I'm very guilty of that. I've done it. I do it, but I think the difference is I've learned from what that causes, and so learning how to just kind of, and I'm still in that process of just learning how to sort of deal with it and be like, all right, cool, let me put this to the side so I can focus on just me. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people haven't figured out their identities. And so because of that, they're looking around, and that plays a huge part in, and this all still relates to creating music, because I think as musicians, we're creating based off of our identities, and you know, when you see all these artists and all the stuff that they do, it's an identity thing. And so I think a lot of it for me is really about pushing all of that to the side and making sure that I'm doing what feels right to me, what feels natural to me, what doesn't feel like I'm trying to force, doesn't feel like I'm trying to force something. And yeah, I think because when I started off in music, I was really watching a lot of other people, because I thought, oh, I need to be a particular person, or I need to be like this person or that person in order to fit in. And I think after many conversations with like my parents, friends, and then just even observations of like stuff in the music industry, in life, whatever, I just kind of came to this conclusion of like, why am I trying to like be someone else? You don't feel comfortable in your own skin. You don't, most times people can see that you also don't feel comfortable in your own skin, and they can tell that it's not authentically you. And I got my mum that checks me regularly. She's always just like, doesn't seem like it's you. Sometimes she's a bit too harsh, but she's very real about it. So yeah, it is very much about, I think it is very much about being intentional about remaining who you are and being true and honest to yourself. And, you know, again, another big part of that is finding your identity. Like, I feel like for a lot of us young Christians, we don't take advantage of the fact that like we truly know someone that helps us find our identity. And, you know, it's almost like a shortcut, really, because a lot of people can spend their whole lives trying to figure out who they are. And we already know who can help us find our identity. And we just need to like go to him, and we, you know, most times we never do. We try and figure it out by ourselves. And so that's another big part of it as well. It's just really knowing, finding my identity in God. Well, I think two things. I think it's about us encouraging them and them encouraging each other. Sometimes with youth, as incredible as they are and all these things that you see them come up with and the things that they do, sometimes I feel like they're not encouraged enough by us in anything that they do. And then other times as well, I don't feel like and I think as a result of that, because we don't encourage them, they almost don't encourage each other to, you know, be better or to do better and all these types of things. And so I think for me, I think encouragement. I think that like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen at all, but I'm saying that I would love to see more of it, where it doesn't always feel like we're against the youth. And it doesn't always feel like we're putting them down and making them feel like their ideas are bad, or like they've ruined the world and the way that the world, do you know what I mean? It's and so for me, I feel like, I want to see more encouraging of you know, youth's ideas, encouraging them in the areas of like in faith and so on and so forth, and to yeah, allow them to grow and become people of purpose. And so yeah, I'd love to see more encouragement. Kind of feels like a domino effect. Once we do it, then maybe they'll start doing it for each other.